I'm Xanderwood. I make indie games and tutorials on game development. I also play your indie games every week on my channel. Make sure you subscribe and click that bell icon so you never miss a video.
And as always, a massive shout out to my wonderful Patreon community and YouTube channel members: Jet Simon, Enmark Games, Basic Terrazan, Foozle CC, Rob, Lightning Cat, Olivia Bernier, Tor Alexanderson, Matt, Fam Van, Amari Lewis, Seth Coble, Retro Galaxy, and Gerard Demont. So you can see the bat, it has a all it does is move around the screen at various different points, and then occasionally just swoops in towards the player, which is relatively easy to put together, I think. It does slow down when it gets hit by a weapon, which we'll add in as well. So I've gone ahead off camera because I didn't want to bore you guys with the pixel art. All I've done is I've created a sprite. I'm going to call it Boss. In terms of its size, it's 32 by 32, and it's got two animations. It's got hatch and it's got idle, which will basically be just the flying around. So the hatch is just 4 frames. Feel free to pause and copy it, or I'm sure with a little bit of work you can probably knock up something a little bit better than what I've done. So this is just the hatching animation, and it's basically just the first 3 frames just coming out of a kind of cocoon, and then the next one is just flipped, which is the actual sprite that I drew. Please don't judge me on the artwork. I did it in about 5 minutes. And then the idle, which is the flying, is basically just a flapping animation, which I've looped. If I play it, you can see for what we need it for, it works fine. That's just going to be its default animation as it's moving around the screen and swooping in and attacking you. So first thing we need to do is go to our layer 2, which we have here, which we created in the last episode. And this one is linked to an event sheet called Boss Events, which is currently just empty with the exception of on start of layout, open the fade transition. So after we've opened the fade transition, we're going to add in a wait because it takes 0.1, half a second, 0.5 seconds for that to happen. Once the transaction has happened, then we're going to go ahead and play the boss animation. So we're going to say set speed animation to, I think it was 5. Let me just check on the hatch. Yeah, the hatch animation is on 5. So in order to stop that playing when we start the level, we need to add in an action to tell it that. So let's go to boss and let's click on stop animation, and we're going to have that happen first. So as soon as the layout loads, it's going to stop that animation, it's going to wait for the fade, and then it's going to open it. So let's just check that straight off the bat. And it doesn't do anything, so let's just double check. Set animation speed to, oh, it's because we set stop and then we set the speed. So instead of setting the speed here, we can just set it to play. So start from its current frame. There we go, and then he pops out. Now we need to set an action, an event to say that once he's finished playing that animation, so we're going to say on finished, and that animation is going to be hatch. Don't know why I did it in capitals. It doesn't have any relevance. So once we finish playing the hatch animation, we're going to go ahead and play the idle animation, and then that will just loop. So if I play that now, he'll hatch and then he will start flapping and flying, and that's exactly how we want it to start. Now you'll notice that the player is not in here, so we need to spawn in the player as well. So that's going to happen immediately when the level starts. Now where do we want the player to spawn in? I'm going to pop him right in the middle, just directly underneath the bat. So what we need to do now is spawn in the player. So we're going to spawn in the player on start of layout. So add an action. We're going to say system, and we're going to create the object player base, and this will be on the objects layer. And the X and Y position, I'm going to leave it at 0 because I want to just figure out where that's going to be. It's going to be directly down here underneath the boss. So if I use the boss just to get an idea of where I want that to be, I can use the image point. The position is going to be 168 by 160 by 160. Now because all of our player events, and our player logic is in its own event sheet called player events, I'm going to include that event sheet in the boss events event sheet. So we can right click and we can say include event sheet, and we're going to say player events, and that way everything we type in and put into this event sheet here will be available in this one, in the boss events. We need an every tick, so we're going to say add event, we're going to say system, and we're going to say every tick, and we need to set the player every tick's position to the player base. Set position to player base dot x and player base dot y, and that's not going to come in because the player isn't in this event sheet, so it doesn't load in with the game. So let's just go ahead and grab the player, just drag him out to the side here, it doesn't matter where, it can just be off to one side, so that when we load, that sprite will load in with the game. And there he is. And now we can control him because we've linked in the player event sheet, and he has all the same information as before. The only problem is we've got the bats flying in from side to side, which may not be a bad thing. If you want to keep those things coming in as an extra addition to difficulty, then you could do. That's not a problem. But if you want to switch them off, let's show you how to do that now. The reason they're coming in is because the event sheet, the player event sheet, includes the enemy's event sheet. Now, if we double click on that, we can now see with regards to the bats that every 6 seconds they're going to spawn in and fly across the screen. Now, there's a few things you can do to switch that off, and I think the easiest thing would just be to disable that group when the boss event sheet loads. So let's go ahead and add an action and go system, and we're going to set group active, and that group is going to be bats, and we're going to set it to deactivated, so that means when we load in the enemy's event sheet, we're going to load everything in, but it's not going to make the bats or anything else, well, the bats group relevant, and everything else won't be relevant because it's not part of level 2. So now when we play it, that everything works fine and no bats are arriving. Now let's add in a few ledges for the player to jump on, and I'm going to just simply copy out an instance of the ground, and I am going to shrink it down, and I'm just going to put one over there and one over there. Just make sure I can jump on that. And we can kind of walk through it because the sprite is half the size of the player. I don't like that, so let's move it up one. And you can see there that he's kind of bumping into the top, but what I want these blocks to have is the jump through, so I can jump through them from the bottom. So we're going to add in another behavior. I'm going to add new behavior, and that is going to be jump through. Now because these are the jump through. Now because these are the same as the ground, or the ground is also now going to have jump through enabled, which isn't going to be an issue because we're never going to jump up underneath it. But what you could do is go back to layout 1, even on these walls here, and then just disable the jump through on the ones that you don't want it on. But I don't think it's going to be an issue because they're going to have the solid enabled anyway. However, with these ones here, I'm going to disable the solid, and I'm just going to keep the jump through enabled. So now we can jump up through them, but you can see we're going behind them, which is not what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop these two down here. I'm going to select them both, and over here on the layers, I'm going to drop them down to layer 0. So they're going to be behind where the player spawns in. There. Perfect. Now we need to get the bat moving. So there's a few different ways you can do this as well. Now one of the ways you could do it is by adding in little waypoints, little sprites that it could then pick and move across to. But then you're going to be in a position where the bat's always only ever going to be in certain places because it's only going to be traveling to and from these waypoints. Another way we can make the bat move is with line of sight. So we could get it to pick a path somewhere within the area of the screen, and then on path found, move it to that path, and when it arrives, recalculate another path. And both of those ways would work fine. The way I'm going to do it in here, I think, is with the line of sight. So the second way. Just because I've got a few other tutorials that use I think I've got my boss AI tutorial in the easy game mechanics playlist, which uses the sprites, which tells it to go to certain waypoints. Okay, let's click on the boss. Let's add an instance variable. Let's call this state, and we're going to make it a string, and we're going to give it an initial value of fly. So he's going to be in two states. He's going to be in one of two states at any one time. He's going to be in either the fly state, which means he's going to be moving around, or he's going to be in the attack state, which means he's going to be coming straight for us in a kind of darted, move directly towards the player state. So we've got that variable on the bat now to control that, which just says state equals fly. So go back to boss events. In the boss AI group, just create a group, call it boss AI, add an event, and we're going to say boss, and we need to compare that state. So we're going to compare instance variable state is equal to fly. Copy and paste that out again, and then change the second state to attack. So now we've got two statements which clearly say if he's in this state, we're going to put the logic in there, and if he's in this state, we're going to put the logic under there. So let's do the fly state first. So let's click on fly, add a sub event, and we're going to double click, and we're going to say boss. In fact, we need to give it some behaviors. So let's click on the behaviors of the boss, add a new behavior. First thing we're going to do is give it pathfinding, add a new behavior, and we're going to give it move to. Go back to boss. If state equals fly, double click boss. First thing we're going to want them to do is find a path. So let's go down to pathfinding. In fact, we don't need it in the sub event there. We can go onto the action to the right hand side of it and go boss, and we can say find path. Now we're going to find a path somewhere around us. So let's say self.x, which is where we are, and then we're going to add random open brackets -100 to 100. So that's basically going to create a distance of 200 pixels, 100 pixels to the left, 100 pixels to the right, and it's going to pick a destination within that range. Self.y plus random, and exactly the same on the y-axis, which is up and down. So now it's going to create a circle around us with a diameter of 200 pixels. We're going to find a path somewhere within those perimeters. Let's go ahead and just drag that one to the top so I can see underneath me. So once we've done that, we're going to add an event to boss AI, and we're going to say boss, and we are going to go down to pathfinding, and we're going to say on path found. Now if we find a path, we're going to obviously want to move to that destination, so add an action boss, and we've added the move to behavior already, so we're going to move along pathfinding path direct. Add another event to boss AI. We're going to go on boss, and now we need to tell it what to do when we arrive. So on move to, on arrived. Make sure it's on move to arrived and not pathfinding arrived, because we use the move to behavior to move the sprite to the path. So on move to arrived, add action. We're going to say boss. In fact, we're going to say system, and we're going to say wait 1 second, and then we're going to calculate a new path. So we can just copy that line of code up there, drag it underneath. So effectively what we're going to do is we're going to find a path, we're going to move to it. When we get there, we're going to calculate a new path, again somewhere within that 200 pixel radius. Now what happens if we can't find a path? If we go back to layout 2, I've put in, you can see I've put in the blocks, the solid behavior ground outside the layout. This is going to stop the bat from being able to leave the screen. So if it picked the path out here, we don't want it flying off the screen. So I've put those boundaries in to stop it. So there will be a possibility that when we create a path, he's going to find a path outside this block, and obviously he's not going to be able to move to it. So we're going to add an event, and we're going to say boss, and we're going to come down to pathfinding, and we're going to say on failed to find path. So what happens if we can't find the path? Well, we're just going to go ahead and calculate a new path. So we can just drag that exact same line of code down, and away we go. Now, because we've set the instance variable to fly off the bat there, we should be able to... Oh, and you can see he's kind of freaking out. Okay, so The reason it's happening over and over again is because the state's constantly in fly, so it's constantly calculating that path. So let's double click into this empty blank sub event, double click, let's hit a trigger once, and see, there we go. But you can see he's already started to calculate paths immediately from the start of the game, which is what we don't want. We want him to kind of go through that animation here. So when we've got on animation hatch finished, set animation state to idle, we need to set up a condition which then allows him to become go into this animation here. So let's go ahead and add an action. I'm going to say boss, and we're going to set the value of state to fly. Go back to layout 2 and then just delete the initial value on state. So his state is nothing when the game starts. We also want him to stop rotating around when he's moving. So let's go ahead here in the properties of pathfinding and uncheck rotate. And again on move to, uncheck set angle. And I want to change maximum speed down to 150. I want to put acceleration at 300 and deceleration at 150. Just to kind of make him move a little bit smoother. So now he's going to come in, he's going to finish his animation, and then he's going to just move around the screen because he's in his fly state, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. He's going to pick destinations around the screen, and he's going to move to it. That was just coincidentally exactly where the player was. Great. Okay. Now let's go ahead and program in the attack. So I'm going to go ahead and drag the attack down to the bottom here. So what happens when we're in the attack state? Well, if we're in the attack state, we're going to need to move towards the player. So let's go ahead and add a sub event, and let's go system, and we're going to trigger once again, so we don't have that situation like we did with the fly where he's all over the shop. Add an action, and we're going to say boss, and we just need to simply come down to the move to behaviors, and we need to move to an object, and that object is going to be the player. Direct. We're not going to be able to test that because he's going to be in the fly animation state. So we need to now have a condition which toggles the state that we're in. So let's go ahead and add another event, and we're going to go system, and we can say every X seconds, and let's say random 2 to 5 seconds. Add an action, and we're going to say boss, and we're going to come down here, and we're going to say set value and to state, and we're going to do a choose. In fact, I don't think I do want to do a choose. I want to just, let's compare, because otherwise we might end up choosing the same state twice. So let's push the sub event, B for a sub event, and I'm going to copy down that line, that event there, and I'm going to push B on the keyboard again, and I'm going to copy down this one. So we've effectively put in 2 sub events which say every 2 to 5 seconds depending on what state we're in. So if we're in fly or if we're in attack. Now let's add an action. I'm going to say boss, and now we're going to set value of state to attack if we're in fly, and if we're in attack, you probably guessed it, we're going to set that state back to fly, and then that's going to toggle it every 2 to 5 seconds. So now he's in fly. Within 2 to 5 seconds, it's now going to make a beeline for us. Hopefully. He doesn't seem to want to come and attack us. He's obviously a shy bat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go onto the objects layer. I'm going to double click, and what I like to do sometimes, just so I can get a visual representation of what's going on, is I'm going to create a text box. I'm going to call this debug. And I'm going to set the text white so I can see it, and I'm going to pop that down there. I'm going to change the size to 10, and I'm going to go back to boss events, and under my every tick I'm going to go ahead and set that debug text. I'm going to set it to equal the boss dot state. So whatever state the boss is in. There you go, you see it's in fly now. You can see that it doesn't seem to be switching it to attack. It's just constantly in fly. It's definitely been more than 5 seconds now. So there's an issue with this every random 2 to 5 seconds. So instead of using every 2 to 5 seconds, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to set a timer on the bats. So let's go ahead and add another behavior, add new behavior. Let's go and find the timer. I'm going to set a timer. So on start of layout, add an action for boss. And let's start timer. The duration is going to be random. Again, 2 to 5 seconds. So it's going to pick, it's going to trigger it once. And let's call this the attack timer. But I've changed my mind. I don't want it on start and layout. I want it when the animation has finished. Start the attack timer. And then that's going to run every 2 to 5 seconds. Now, down here, we're going to delete this block that we just put in with the every 2 to 5 seconds. And we're just going to say what happens when that timer runs out. So we're going to say boss. And we're going to say on timer. And the timer is going to be attack. So when that timer runs out, what do we want to happen? We're going to add an action. In fact, we're going to add a sub-event. And this is where we're going to compare what state we're in. So if we're in fly, and I could have just copied that over really, but it doesn't matter. If we're in fly and if we're in attack. If we're in fly, we're going to say boss, and we're going to say set value of state to attack. In fact, I don't need that second sub-event to say attack because we're not going to run a timer when he's attacking. So on timer, in fact, we're only ever going to run that timer when he's in fly state anyway. So what I might do is drag this down here and pop it in the trigger once on fly. So as soon as he turns into fly state, we're going to start that timer. As soon as that timer runs out, we don't need that comparison there. We can just set the state to attack. And then we can say system wait 1 second or 2 seconds. And then we can set the state back to fly, which will automatically then restart the timer. So let's just check it out. So he's in fly, the timer's on. There we go, attack, he's come towards us, and now he's gone back to fly. And now he's gone to attack again. And now he's gone back to fly. And then he's gone to attack. And then he's gone to fly and attack. Great. That's working just great. That's exactly what we want. He's going to move towards us and attack us. And he's going to go back to fly. Now, we need to now initiate that knockback on the player when we get hit and the ability to take damage. So where did we put that? Was it in the player hurt? Yeah. Okay, so we've already got this setup that says when the enemies hit the player base. Let's go ahead and change player base to player. Enemies on collision with player rather than player base. Set him to hurt. And now we can go back to layout 2 and we can put the boss in the family. And by adding the boss to the family, we should be able to just piggyback on the logic that we already have. So let's see. Come and attack me when you're ready. There we go. Well, we hit him anyway. So yeah, we can't really touch him, which is great. And now we should be able to kill him. There we go. We can kill him with the dagger, but we don't want the boss to be able to die with one hit. The boss needs to be tallied in or connected with this enemy health bar. So that's what we need to do next. So I'm going to leave it there for this episode because it dragged on a little bit. So in the next episode, we're going to finish off the boss attacks. The last thing we need to do with the boss is link him in with the health bar. So when we hit the boss, we're going to reduce health. And then obviously when the health bar is empty, the boss will die, and then that will be the end of the game. We also need to add in a few sound effects and some music, which we'll probably do in the next episode, or maybe one final episode at the end if you want to see how that works. And I think that will probably be the conclusion of this tutorial series. So if you've made it this far, thanks for sticking around, and thanks for watching through the video content. If you've got suggestions for future tutorial series or game mechanic videos, if you join my Discord, there is a channel in there where you can leave your suggestions and feedback, and I will work through that when I make my video content.